welcome to Moral Side of the News, our weekly discussion of today's top stories from a moral, ethical, and religious perspective. I'm Sean Kilen with the WHAS Crusade for Children, and I'm joined today, as always, by a distinguished panel of local religious leaders. Reverend Dr. George Wasson, Faithpoint Church, Father Toan, Epiphany Catholic Church, Reverend Sally McClain, Christian Church Disciples of Christ, Reverend Dr. Kilen Gray, Creative Spirits Behavioral Health, and Rabbi Matt Durenbacher, The Temple. We begin this week with the uprising in Iran.
Tonight, some American forces on the biggest U.S. base in the Middle East warned to be ready to evacuate. And late today, Iran closing its airspace amid soaring tensions. Just 24 hours ago, President Trump warning Iran the U.S. would take very strong action if they started executing jailed protesters. Late today, the president saying they've now heard from sources that Iran is holding off on the killings.
They've said the killing has stopped and the executions won't take place. There was supposed to be a lot of executions today.
The president signaling military action against Iran is on hold, at least for now.
We're going to watch it and see what the process is, but we were given a very good statement by people that are aware of what's going on. We were just told no executions. I hope that's true. That's a big thing.
But on the ground in Iran, this is the terror ordinary Iranians have faced for almost 3 weeks. Security forces storming a hospital in Elam, hunting for injured protesters, seen in video circulating online. More than 2,600 people, unarmed civilians, have been ruthlessly killed, according to human rights activists. And publicly today, the regime suggesting it isn't backing down. State TV showing the head of the judiciary appearing to urge fast trials and executions of protesters. 26-year-old Irfan Soltani was one of those set to be executed today, according to his family. He's one of more than 18,000 arrested. Speaking to ABC News, his cousin Samaya saying Irfan always spoke about Iran's freedom. He always felt he should not stay silent, she says. He should stand among the people. Late today, his family telling ABC News they've just heard he wasn't executed today. But so far, they haven't been allowed to see him.
So panel, this is the most significant period of turmoil in Iran since the revolution 47 years ago. From a moral, ethical, and religious perspective, how do you interpret the unrest, the government's response, the U.S. response, and the world's response?
It seems to be another episode of authoritarian governments that are not valuing the liberty and the freedom of persons to express their voice. That's historical with Iran. But it looks similar to what we're experiencing here in this country. It's interesting that our governmental leaders would defend protesters in Iran and yet want to hinting at instituting the Insurrection Act for people who are protesting legally with their right to protest and lift their voice against the inhumane practices that we're seeing with ICE and ICE forces that are illegally taking over local spaces in this country. There seems to be a double standard there. We have established Iran to be a category enemy of the United States over the years across various administrations. But I just think that it is really interesting that we would be willing to send our military to Iran to protect protesters and yet arrest protesters here in our country. It just, for me, it just doesn't equate. That doesn't watch. So it's confusing to me to have a moral stand for protesters in one space and an immoral stand against protesters in your own country.
It seems to me that the moral issue has become might makes right. And so we've got this huge, wonderful army that's so equipped and so advanced that now we can go anywhere and do anything. And so I just question the morality of might makes right.
I have a dilemma in this situation. I do believe in bad actor and evil human minds. For example, we often accuse Adolf Hitler for killing several million people. Would we talk so little about Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong, who killed their own people in tens of thousands, tens of millions of people? So are there bad actors? Yes, I do believe that. But at the same time, at what point do we feel justified to go in and help those who are being persecuted? And that is where my dilemma stands. If we don't do anything, or if the world doesn't do anything, or world leaders don't do anything, will people continue to suffer? I believe so. Mm-hmm. But when and how is the dilemma that I have. Continuing, I mean, yeah, we tend to talk about going to country that we think we can, let's say the U.S. But there's so many incidents of human rights violation in Russia, in China, in North Korea. And I wonder why the UN, the world leaders, so backed out from that. To give credit, I do believe that if the U.S. does not stand up, I fear that no one else had the courage to speak on behalf of these people. I have not seen any UN leaders talk about how the Chinese Communist Party continued to kill Falun Gong practitioners and many Muslims from Xinjiang and many other incidents. So if we take the action to do, to what extent and where and how we do it, that is the really dilemma that I have. And it's, of course, moral value or moral stand is not black and white.
I understand that perspective too. You know, if this does anything for us, it continues to reaffirm to us that evil exists in our world, right? And evil manifests itself in so many different ways. And it also highlights where, as a world, as a planet, as different cultures and countries, we're so disunified. Like, there really isn't unity. So I agree with you when you see what's happening. Well, this country is going to continue to do trade with this country who we're seeing is a blatant abuser of human rights or what have you, and this country's not. And I don't know what the best solution is. You know, is it the peace through strength? Is it the is there direct intervention? Do we let it go? I think it's really tough. I don't have an answer. I wish I could give the answer. Probably we all wish we could give the answer that's going to fit it, but I think it's just highlighting the amount of evil that exists in our world today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sitting with actually all of you where you're at right now. It just reminds me in Jewish tradition, we're reminded each year during Passover that God chooses the side of the oppressed. And so wherever there is oppression and pain and suffering in the world, God is there. And in the Exodus story itself, God is the one who facilitates liberation, or is sort of like in charge of the liberation, but it's up to human beings to help each other actually attain that liberation. And so I'm sitting with the same questions of, where is that sort of line? How do we meaningfully and morally engage with other groups outside of our own country when we see suffering? And then at the same time, we're dealing, like you said, Dr. Gray, about the moral dilemma of, well, we also have that in our own home. And so how do we come up with an ethical and moral code that we can stick by in every situation, whether it's at home or abroad or a combination of the two?
I sometimes think that the ethical parlance that governments use is for the benefit of press, it's for the benefit of people. Historically, each administration has had its conflicting episodes of when to support human rights violations and when to just look the other way. I mean, it's the continual story of America throughout our most recent administrations for the last few decades. We want to now go and support with military force, and it should happen, in my view, to support those who are being oppressed in Iran. And we're not doing a thing at Ukraine. Not one thing. Their cities are being bombed mercilessly, and there's no action at all by our government. So I share the confusion, and I share the question of what's the line.
Right.
To me, governments, while speaking morality, speak with economic expedience. There's, you know, and so it's cloaked in this description, the interest of the United States. That we do actions that is in the national interest of the United States. That is never explained. It is never made plain what that really means. We just snatched a leader from Nicaragua for the
You mean
Venezuela. Venezuela. Yes, Venezuela, for the purposes of drug interdiction, and yet all of the action is toward procuring and taking natural resources that belongs to that country. And because of the hubris of our leaders, we're claiming that oil to be ours. By what legal right we're able to do that, that's not explained. How we're able to formulate that type of plan, that's not explained. It is expected of us as a people to just accept what's being presented, that we can go into another sovereign country and do that. So my argument is, we don't know if there's even any moral basis for why these decisions are being made, but we do know that there are political, geopolitical, and economic motivations that's couched under this title, American interest. And so that's a disturbing thing for me, that we're not able to be consistent across the board. We can snatch USAID aid up and let children die in African countries, and then show up when there are other human rights violations that are taken. And as has been spoken, we say nothing about China. We're saying nothing about North Korea. We're saying nothing about Russia. And now we're ready to talk bold and bad when it comes to the issues that are happening in Iran.
Well, we look at the problem of evil, right? That is so, it's of such magnitude, you know, that there are all these countries, all these places, all these peoples, the who's, the where's, the when's of how do we get involved in. And I think it's easy for us to say, wow, what can we do, and just not know. And I think as religious leaders, one of the things that we get to do in our pulpits and our places of ministry is really to equip our people to be peacemakers, to be ones who bring the truth in the Christian tradition, bring the truth of the gospel into the situation so that we actually can be difference makers. We don't know what difference we individually might be able to make in a place that's on the other side of the planet, but we can make differences here. And so what I want to always try to do is to help my folks to not get paralyzed, to not get caught up in oh, woe is me, it's just all so bad and there's nothing that we can do. And it's like, no. God has gifted you to do certain things that other people can't do. So let's figure out what we can do that we can start small. It's why when we look at our missions, for instance, in our congregation, is we ask the question, how do we do things local, national, and international, right? So that we can try to make differences. So we get glimpses and pictures and projects and things that we get to do something. So we don't have to be paralyzed. We don't have to look at all that and be like, oh, woe is me, there's nothing I can do, I just gotta wash my hands. No, there is stuff that you can do. And that's where, from that moral, ethical, religious perspective of what can we do in situations like this, I just want my folks to know that there is hope. There is things that we can do.
But we have to look at our own history. We have to look at Roosevelt, who goes in and proclaims war when we're taking and incarcerating Japanese people, building concentration camps and putting them in a camp as we're trying to free other people from camps. So do we not always have this dilemma going on? And let's talk about Native Americans. We've certainly not been kind there. So where is our real heart? Is it to work to take care of our own? Are we just totally global? Do we forget that we have scars that need to heal? Sometimes I wonder, is it just so much confusion to try and figure out what it is that we're about?
Yeah. There's always some amount or some level of selfishness and greediness in any action that we take. And I think that those elements of greed and selfishness often play a big role in the action we take. But I believe all of that, given that it's part of our human nature, because if we don't have a purpose, a real purpose, not many good action there are not many good actions that can be done for those who are oppressed. We are living, I believe, in a time because there's so much being offered to us in terms of news, media. It's part of the several subjects today, biased media, and the general folks, the general audience, the faithful, ordinary citizens, they are so confused, including ourselves, at least myself to some extent. I often hear, every now and then, some of close friends would say in my circle that try to be faithful to the gospel, the message of the gospel, and to what Jesus said. That's true, but people can also, or any preacher, including myself, we can be very biased, using the scripture to support our own ideology. The point is, where do we draw the line between objective good and personal good? And it's a very real and big challenge.
One of our historical figures, his birthday is today, and that is the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., born on the 15th January. We're celebrating his birthday today and throughout the rest of the weekend, who addressed that very question in his most famous writing, The Letter from the Birmingham Jail, where he actually addressed those pastors who were saying to him that he was going in the wrong way with the way that he was using scripture to try to speak up for the rights for African Americans. I would recommend everybody to read that letter because that is part of what has undergirded his theology about social justice and the act toward that. And when we ask what we can do in the face of all of the injustices that we see, we know that we have to remember that part of the love of God includes justice. And his response, Dr. King's response, was to rally those who were oppressed to speak truth to power in various different ways, of which those religious persons who are wedded to power did not like, both black and white. And so that he gives a model using the model of Mahatma Gandhi with Satyagraha strategy they used to liberate the people in India is nonviolent resistance to injustice, that just because a law is legal doesn't make a law just or moral.
That is very true.
And so that's a good example for all of us during his birthday today and throughout the rest of the weekend. And on Monday is the holiday.
Yeah.
It would be I would encourage everyone to just look and remember how justice was won for persons who were being marginalized in our country.
And if we look at that too, the Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel marched with Dr. King.
Yes, indeed.
Because he firmly believed that every Jew is called to engage in tikkun olam, in repairing the world. And that's a daunting task, right? How can one person repair the entire world? And one of it's the golden rule for all of us, right? Love your neighbor as yourself.
That's right.
Well, how can I actually love my neighbor if I don't know them? Right? And so expanding our awareness of who we are and who we're in community with, then we get to know our neighbor, then we get to love our neighbor. And through loving our neighbor, we can figure out what their needs are and what our needs are and how we can work together. And then the sort of final piece of that is mitzvah goreret mitzvah. One act of compassion, of love, of kindness leads to another. And we know on the other side of that, one act of violence leads to another too. And so we have this tension that we're sitting with, and I'm really glad you brought up Dr. King and remembering that justice lives in the heart of compassion and love.
Great conversation. Thanks for watching and listening to Moral Side of the News this week on WHS Radio and WHS Television. Father Toan touched on it. Let's move to the mistrust in media that we're seeing a lot lately. So there's a growing mistrust in news media. For the sake of getting the conversation started, I'll point to a recent study. U.S. teens think reporters are skilled at lying than informing the public. And about half believe the news media frequently engages in unethical practices such as making up quotes. When asked what word best describes news media among teens, 84% surveys expressed negative sentiment, often using words like fake and false, lies. I'd like to pop up a graphic real fast from a website called All Sides Media. Does a really good job breaking down media bias and what many believe contributed to some of the calling the lost generation of news consumers and the division we are seeing amplified in our country. Now, it breaks down where every left center, right center. So panel, your thoughts. We have about 5 minutes left. It's not just teens that believe this. It's every generation, but the study pointed to teens. So I'll turn it over to you all.
I think it's sad that we even have to do that, right? Like what happened to the day when news was the news and it was just reported, right? And you didn't really have to worry about was somebody right or left or center or wherever they were. They just presented the news. And I think a piece that even that graphic doesn't even highlight that it seems more and more to me these days is this whole influence of AI where it looks like it's news, it looks like it's real, and you discover it's not, but sure gets packaged that way. And because we all have social media and such, I mean, it's just, who knows what we're getting these days? I'm right there with that generation. Do I trust media? Nope. Is it easy, hard? Nope. And it's sad.
Neither do I trust it. I often run into parishioners or members of the parish. They are so confused and they are so bogged down and distraught. And they asked me for advice, and I kept saying that so far the only thing that I can see that might be helpful is asking them to give up watching the news for a week or two and see what happens. Because we've depended over the years, just like everything else, if we depend on certain things like drugs, alcohol, news, media, technology, we give up our freedom to think.
I think that we have to look at this within the cultural context of where we are. And a big part of that context is the decrease of literacy within the American populace.
Yeah.
And the disdain from leaders on scientific discovery. These things are connected in my mind, that we have persons who don't trust journalism because we're reading less. We're not trusting what we read in general. And then you add to that the increase, the explosion of corporate influence among the press and the media who have an ideological bend. And so the press hasn't become the press as it is by itself. I am an avid fan for journalists. I have great friends who are journalists, and I understand the work that they do and the difficulty it is of sharing what they need to share. We can take the press outside of its context and make all kinds of conclusions about it, but we have to keep it within the context of where we are today. And literacy within our community, within our nation, is a big piece that we have to consider with that.
I think the thing that's concerning for me is because the younger generations are less trusting of news outlets, they're turning to social media for information. Yes. And the assumption is, oh, this random person on the internet is going to tell me the truth. No, absolutely not.
or even their favorite star or athlete, right?
Right. The person on TikTok has the motivation to say something provocative so that they are introduced into the algorithm and are popped up on more screens. And then there's also a financial component to that too. And so the piece for me is attached to what you're talking about is just literacy in general.
I think a lot of it has to do with how does it apply to their everyday lives.
Yeah.
Does it really matter what's going on in the news? Does it really matter to me? Does it matter to my friends? Because their sense of community seems to be pretty strong and tight among young people. Yeah. So, you know, if they're not interested in what's going on in the news, you know, I'm thinking of women and reproductive rights. And it was, for young women, it's always been there. And now it's not. So does it matter that it's not there anymore, and how do they go about changing it? So I think these things also make a difference.
Yeah, well said. I wish we had more time to discuss it. Maybe we'll bring it up again on the moral side, because it's been on our list for several weeks now. And you made a natural transition for us to talk about today. The first topic usually goes a little longer. So anyway, thank you for our panel this week. Reverend Dr. George Wasson, Faithpoint Church, Father Toan, Epiphany Catholic Church, Reverend Sally McClain, Christian Church Disciples of Christ, Reverend Dr. Kilen Gray, Creative Spirits Behavioral Health, and Rabbi Matt Durenbacher, the Temple and former student of Reverend Dr. Kilen Gray.
Yes.
Maybe a first for the show. Thanks for watching Moral Side of the News this week. Join us again next week for an all-new show.